Combating corruption, a very important topic. In this direction, we have to look into the previous year questions also. The exact words present in your syllabus are challenges of corruption. Dear students, please answer this question. It is often said that poverty leads to corruption. However, there is no dearth of instances where affluent and powerful people indulge in corruption in a big way. What are the basic causes of corruption among people? Support your answer with examples. So just tell me whatever you know, because it is not that which is there in any book. This is a general common sense question which you have to reflect on. If you have not reflected this kind of question in your day-to-day things, in the examination hall, it will be very difficult for you to write that. Okay, who will answer this?
So if there is corruption in the society, that means there will be it will be a illiterate society mostly. Majority of the society will be illiterate. So if there is, I mean, if the people are not literated, if they're not educated, they will not know or they'll not be aware of the society, how it works. So people in the authority start taking advantage of this.
Okay. Any other answer? Okay, please answer the first one. Are you agreeing to this point? Poverty leads to corruption, first of all.
Can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
Sir, regard to the first statement, sir, even if we agree that poverty leads to corruption, there is no proof that this prosperity could automatically lead to honesty, sir.
Okay, good point. Okay, can anyone substantiate or explain if this is true, like how poverty leads to corruption? Okay, dear students, the main intent of the question here is poverty is a very, very important topic in the whole civil service. It is the one of the topic which has been repeated many times in your GS2, General Studies 2, General Studies 1, and even 3, and even some more touches in GS4 also. Generally think that poverty means there are no resources. So since the people are not having resources, they may indulge in corruption is the meaning of this first line. But this may not be the truth. And like Madam said, like poverty will be generally present in illiterate society. That may not be correct. That will be like very value loaded judgment. It is like has to like I got the intent as to what you want to say. What you meant to say is like if there is no pressure from the civil society is not vibrant, then there won't be checks. So there will be corruption. But we cannot relate corruption and illiteracy here. Here, we have discussed a very important concept yesterday, values. How values are important to curtail corruption. At the same time, how institutional measures are important to curtail corruption. You have to elaborate this on those lines. If there is a general decline in the value in the society, number one. Second one, if there are no institutional measures it leads to corruption. Yes, students, think it over and write answer and produce this to me. I will correct the things. Think, what I suggest is your answers as of now should be based on your reflection, your thought, your thinking. You should come up with more number of options, because once you get into the others mode, or once you Google the things and once you find the things, your cognitive capacity stops there. Somehow definitely you will be going through all those things in future, but to begin with you have to start thinking. You have to read this question again and again, and you have to come up with the things. Very straightforward question. 2015, another UPSC question. Today we find that in spite of various measures like prescribing code of conduct, setting up vigilance cells, committees, right to information, active media, strengthening of legal mechanisms, corrupt practices are not coming under control. Every method is been told here. Code of conduct, vigilance, media, right to information, everything is there. But corruption is not coming to control. Why? By the end of this chapter, you should be able to answer this. You have to answer this, and you please reproduce me. Start writing answer. It's a high time for you. Another question. Corruption causes misuse of government treasury, administrative inefficiencies, and obstruction in the path of national development. Discuss Kautilya's views. We have discussed many things with respect to Kautilya. Please add those things. These are straightforward questions. Non-performance of duty by public servant is a form of corruption. Do you agree with this view? Justify your answer. Please come up with some answer for this. Non-performance of duty by public servant is a form of corruption.
When the public servant does his work, we are prompted to give him money and get the work done. So that leads to corruption.
Okay, very good. Next.
So every file that a government service, government public servant receives is a life of a people that is concerned. So a non-performance of a duty by a public servant is definitely a form of corruption, sir. They're actually playing with the lives of the people also.
Good. Can you look into another angle? Say, for example, you are a IAS officer, IPS officer. You have taken a oath. You have made an agreement where you have signed and you have told that you will perform your duty. So corruption means it is a unethical behavior. Corruption means unethical behavior. If you are not doing your duty, don't you think this is unethical? Leave about the repercussions, what it will be having. You are speaking about the results. What will happen if one public servant won't work? That's not the real main intent. Somehow it is, somehow subsequently it will be there. But what they're asking is, you as a civil servant, you have agreed that you will work, you'll perform your duties, you'll follow the code of conduct, you'll keep public interest in the main. When you are not doing that, won't it leads to corruption? Definitely, because you are not standing by your commitments. This is one of the angle which you have to look into these things. Dear students, write all the 4 questions. If possible, write elaborately. Otherwise, at least write whatever you feel to begin with. Please start writing answers, because this is the only way in which you will be getting service. No other way. Okay. Control systems, we have discussed two control systems. Control system means mechanisms designed to deter, punish, and curtail corruption, penalty rates, internal control. What is the meaning of internal control? Why it is called internal control?
Within the system itself, they have the control, executives and legislature.
Okay, like you have just played the general common sense, but you have missed the main point. External system is, do you mean this is outside the system? See, by looking into the things which I am underlining, can you tell what is that? We need to concentrate in the class. Internal control means it is referring to that which is there within the executive. External means outside the executive. Why we say that this is internal, this is external? Dear students, internal because executive is the person who is executing all the things. Executive is the person who is having power. Let me explain this again in the next slide. What do you understand by audit? What do you understand by judiciary? What is audit? Say, for example, mother checks father's pocket. Can we take that as audit? Or a boyfriend or girlfriend, often they want to check the other's phone. Can we take that as an audit? What is audit? What is judiciary? Yes, students, why I asked is, this is where you will be lagging. I think in the class, there is no one who is not having the idea of what is audit. Everybody has the idea. Everybody know what is engineering. But when it is when you are called upon to tell what is engineering, it is difficult. Means you have to develop the art of expressing the things. That is the reason why I insisted, like daily read the editorial. After reading, try to come up, try to write 2 to 3 lines about that editorial. By doing that, you learn the art of expressing the things. Already you know what is judiciary, you know what is audit. But the art of writing, the art of expressing comes only with practice. Dear students, audit generally refer to the official inspection of an organization's account, typically by an independent auditor. So it is official, it is inspection, and it's with respect to account. When it comes to judiciary, it is a system of courts that interpret, defends, appeals the laws in the name of the state. So what is the work of a court? What is the work of a judiciary? What judiciary consists of? Judiciary consists of system of courts, very, very important. They interpret, defend, and appeal the laws, very important. Judiciary can also be thought as a mechanism for resolution of the dispute, second one. So first is with respect to law, second is resolution of disputes. Please concentrate here, this is much important. Under the doctrine of separation of power, judiciary generally does not make statutory laws, which is the responsibility of legislature. So judiciary is not making laws. What is the work of judiciary? It is to interpret, defend the laws, to resolve the disputes. Two important works is with respect to law, and another is with respect to disputes. It is not involved in making laws. It is the responsibility of legislature. And it is not involved in the enforcement of law. which is the responsibility of executive, right? So it is just an interpreter of the laws. But in some cases, judiciary does make common law when these two fail to do that. So, students, here internal control refers to that which is there in the executive. Internal. Why? Because he is the person who is executing. He is the person who is executing. So all the powers are with him. Your legislature is just making laws. They don't have money. They don't have purse. One who holds the purse is the one who is more powerful. Think of the case. Say, for example, in your home, either father or mother who has money will be having power. Who is executing the things will be having power. So, internal is with respect to executive. External means outside the executive, not outside the system. Right? So this is very important because these things reverberate throughout the syllabus. Okay, external control. In that, external control systems act as formal mechanisms. These are not informal. See, I have like taken everything line by line from second ARC. If I tell on my own, it will be like it won't be that appropriate. To give the sense of real words of the second ARC, I keep those things as it is. Otherwise, it would have been very easy for me to explain in my own words. So external control is a formal mechanism. So it is a formal mechanism of restraint and in an administration that provides separation of powers, checks and balances are provided by other branches of the government. So these checks and balances are in the form of external control. In India, external control system is fully in place. It consists of external audit. See, very important, external audit, because inside the departments also you will be having audit. Chief auditor will be there for every department. But we are speaking about external audit, audit which is outside the executive and independence judiciary. System of audit represented by COG, Comptroller and Auditor General. The COG is an independent authority created by the Constitution. Independence of audit is provided by the Constitution and Comptroller and Auditor General of India, duties, powers and conditions of service 1970. Very important point. This may be asked in your preliminary examination. Here, Constitution provides for independent COG. At the same time, there is a law, that is Comptroller General of India Act 1971. This law also stipulates and gives powers to COG. Very important. Government consists of three branches: executive, legislature, and judiciary. Along with that, in India, you have got independent constitutional bodies. These also are included in government. I mean to say that government not only includes legislature, executive, and judiciary, it also includes independent constitutional bodies. Why this differentiation? Why we have to add this? Because, say for example, your COG, can we add him to legislature? Can we add him to executive or judiciary? No. Election Commission, so where he stands? Finance Commission, where he stands? They're independent constitutional bodies. They have a separate existence. That existence is given by the constitution itself. So when you are writing about government, you should mention a line with respect to the constitutional bodies also, right? The same thing here. Next, what are the conditions under which an audit can become effective in tackling corruption? So audit, when will it be effective? What are the conditions under which the audit can be effective in tackling the things? According to second ARC, I reiterate everything which I'll be telling with respect to corruption or according to second ARC report. So that is the reason you may find this little monotonous, because like I can't add anything here. So because I want to take this in a very pure form as given by the second ARC. First, audit should be independent. When it will be effective, it will be effective only when the audit is independent of executive and external to it. In the previous class, in the last slide, we read one thing. If the ghosts are present in the mustard seeds, how can the mustard seed eliminate this ghost? So to remove some these ghosts which are present in this mustard seed, there is a need of some external agency. One of them is your audit. This will be effective when it is independent of executive. So in India, it is independent of executive, and it is external to it. In India, it is external. As I told you, it is not represented by anyone, either in parliament, legislature, executive, judiciary. An independent and external audit assures expenditure control by exposure and sanctions against corruption. So by exposing the malpractices and also sanctions against the corruption, the COG in India is independent of executive and external to it. Very important point. So COG is independent. It is independent of executive and also external to the executive. It is not present within the executive. It has also been given power and the means and the resources to scrutinize corrupt practices by the civil service and recommission action. So here it is only recommend action, right? So COG is independent, it is external. It has got all the means, powers to scrutinize the corrupt practices. One small problem is its actions are in the form of recommendation. It is not having sanctions against the corruption here. That is a lacuna of Indian audit system. Second one, to be effective, there should be mechanism to act on the observations of the audit. So by audit, you will come to have some of the findings. You have to act upon this. So there has to be some mechanism. In India, such mechanisms exist, but in practice, executive in India is reluctant to act on the observations of the audit. So this is a very important practical thing. It is given by the second ARC. Executive is not acting on the observations of the audit. That is one of the defects. Next, with respect to the third one, no significant lag should be caused between the acts of corruption and their exposure in the audit. So there should not be lag, there should not be any delay between the acts of corruption and their exposure. This is one of the greatest defects. Many civil servants are being prosecuted and they are held guilty, and they will go to jail in many cases after decades. In many cases, the case will be closed after the death of the person. There's a great lag here in India. So it can be effective when there is no significant lag. between the acts of corruption and their exposure. That is, audit and action on it should be quick, so that the corrupt civil servants are brought to book on the basis of the audit well in time. But because of the delays in audit and the slow process involved in consideration of the audit reports by the Public Accounts Committee, the impact of audit as an effective instrument of restraint has been only marginal. A very, very important thing, my dear students. Public Accounts Committee, here CAC is said to be the friend, philosopher and guide of Public Accounts Committee. Public Accounts Committee is the one which looks into the audit reports of the CAG. Very important, this has been asked many times. So which is the committee which is looking into the audit reports of CAG? This is the Public Accounts Committee which is looking into the audit report of the CAG. Delays in audit and slow process involved in consideration of audit reports by the Public Accounts Committee, the impact of audit as an effective instrument of restraint has been only marginal. This you have to internalize. Why in India, CAG is external, independent, but it is not that effective. Why? Previously, we have seen that in this case, there is the executive is reluctant to act on the observations of the audit. Once again, here there is a great lag, time lag, because Public Accounts Committee is not that efficient. In fact, as is common expenditure, audit reports relate to transactions which are several years old. In fact, as is a common practice, audit reports relate to transactions that are several years old. Means there is a post-mortem. What is done in post-mortem? After the death of the person, they will examine that is what happening. During, in fact, as is the common practice, audit reports relate to transactions which are several years old. During the intervening years, it is very likely that civil servants who were involved in questionable practices might have been transferred to other departments, or even worse, might have retired from the government service or even died. Dear students, please understand this. In many cases, people have died. After that, the things have come up. So why it is happening? Because of the time gap. In many cases, they might have gone to other departments. So this is one of the defects. If this defect is not there, then audit will be effective. Impact of audit. In fairness, the audit does create an impact, but only marginally. The report of CAG does a great deal of agenda setting for the national debates on corruption in high places. But in most cases, the time lag between the actual act of corruption and reporting about it in the audit is big, so big that it won't be effective. Say, for example, Bofors case. How did many come to know about this? Because of the audit report, right? Fifth Pay Commission has suggested some of the things. This will be very important. Fifth Pay Commission, audit should try to be concurrent as possible. Concurrent as possible means, as the process of spending goes, there should be audit simultaneously, concurrent, coterminously, things should happen. Scandals and scams are known even while they are being planned and executed. If audit draws attention to them forthwith in a well-publicized manner, such scandals can be halted in the middle stride. So, say for example, a contract or anywhere here, if there is something fishy going on, you will come to know in the process itself. Not only that, after the things are over, right? Postmortems are useful, but can only be conducted while the patient is dead. It is better to cure the patient and try to keep him alive. Very, very meaningful sentence. See, postmortem reports happen only after the patient has died. Here, we don't want the patient to die. Means here we don't want the process to happen. We don't want corruption to happen. So it is better to cure that patient and try to keep him alive. That can be done when there is concurrency in audit. Judiciary. Judiciary, the other external control system, is an independent judiciary, which is that which we have in India. The judicious inefficiency, the reasons for those things. See, combating corruption, in that we are dealing with control systems, in that we are dealing with external control, in that we have stepped into judiciary. Judiciary, ineffective instrument, because judiciary will be ineffective for the following reasons. What are these reasons? Can you think, just think, no need to tell also. Please think about the circumstances in which judiciary is inefficient in controlling. Like, give a common sense thought. First and foremost, not many corrupt cases are brought before the courts for trial. Very important. All the corrupt cases are not brought in front of the court. Why? Because the power of sanctioning prosecution in corrupt cases rests with the executive. Very, very important. So, as we have seen, number of cases that have been sanctioned for prosecution have been only few and far between, very few. Let us take us a live example. 2011 KS examination. So, some by due investigation, all these things, it was found that many members and the chairman was involved in corrupt practices. Were involved in corrupt practices. But nothing was done to these people. Why? Executive has the power of sanctioning prosecution. In here, there were in fact two kinds of permissions. One is from the president and another is from the governor. In Karnataka, governor refused to give the permission, though they were found guilty. There was a sting operation. Like everything was clear. The speaking of members, everything was taped. But governor did not give permission. And also they have sent like other classes to the president. Right? Here, very important point. State Public Service Commission members, though they are appointed by the governor, their removal is only by the president. You can imagine how powerful they are. First of all, most important thing, judiciary is ineffective in India. Why? Number one, too many cases won't go for judiciary. Why? Because they need the sanction of executive. If executive gives sanction, then only a case can proceed. Then there will be prosecution. Otherwise, no. Second, the prosecutional system has laid down in the Indian laws and followed in corrupt cases is weak and unprofessional. It has been difficult to obtain evidence, particularly of the kind required under the Act to prove corruption and obtain conviction. Second lacune is in the prosecutional system. Say, for example, Indian Evidence Act. How does judiciary work? judiciary works on some of the codes. Indian Civil Code, Indian Criminal Code, the laws. Clear? So, judiciary is just interpreting the laws. Judiciary gives punishment based on what is there in the law. In India, the prosecution system somehow is tilted towards saving the corrupt people, because it is very, very difficult to obtain the evidence, the kind of evidence required to prove that one is guilty. So the benefit of doubt almost always will be given to the culprit in these cases. Next, long delays in obtaining a decision from the courts in corrupt cases have been a significant barrier. It is not uncommon to see corrupt civil servants being convicted long after the crime, and in most cases only after civil servant has retired. In other words, there is no judicial effectiveness, and the judiciary in India seems to be incapable of expeditiously disposing of the corrupt cases. Very important, very, very powerful thing. See, nobody can criticize even the judiciary, because it leads to contempt of court. If judiciary gives some order, one has to follow. Otherwise, they will go to jail for contempt of court. Say, for example, it was a live example which happened in Karnataka during S.M. Krishna's period. S.M. Krishna was the chief minister. Supreme Court ordered Karnataka government to release Kaveri water to Tamil Nadu. S.M. Krishna is from that area where people are more dependent on Kaveri water. Somehow there was a lot of pressure. He did not leave the water for many reasons you take. So it leads to contempt of court. Almost he was about to go to prison. But he somehow went and he asked apology, and the court forgave him. Here, courts are very, very inefficient. Say, for example, you take any land dispute, it takes 20 years almost to resolve. So Indian judiciary is incapable of expeditiously disposing of the corrupt cases, because it is taking a lot of time. As you are aware, there are lakhs and lakhs of cases still pending in the courts. And next important is Article 311. See, if you become an IAS officer, this is the article which will protect you. Nowhere in almost in any of the constitutions, if you go, you won't find a constitution where the constitution itself protects the civil servant. India is among the only few, and in fact, it may be the only one where constitution itself gives protection to civil servant. And dear students, interpretation of Article 311 by the courts is in such a way that they cannot hold the officials corrupt, because the type of evidence needed, the technical things involved, the safeguards and procedures prescribed under Article 311 have been so interpreted by the courts in India as if to ensure that the cases go in favor of the corrupt on technical grounds. Here, as you are aware, Supreme Court is the ultimate interpreter of the Constitution, ultimate interpreter of the laws. So when it is interpreting the things in such a way that it is helping the corrupt civil servant, but it has been amended. 311 has been amended. Even then, the present state of 311 is in such state that it protects the corrupt civil servant. So many commissions, they have recommended abolition of Article 311, removing Article 311 itself. A very, very important finding. Santanam Committee on Prevention of Corruption rightly remarked Article 311 of the Constitution, as interpreted by our court, has made it very difficult to deal effectively with corrupt civil servants. Even after Article 311 was amended, the panoply of safeguards and procedures still available in the interpreted in such a manner has to make the proceeding portrayed and therefore affect in ultimate analysis. Article 311 requires revisit. So why judiciary is ineffective? One of the reasons is the way judiciary is interpreting Article 311 is giving an edge to the correct civil servant. Supreme Court and Article 142 of Indian Constitution. So here, Article 142. What is this Article 142? Article 142, 142 authorizes the Supreme Court to enforce decrees and orders that it considers necessary for doing complete justice in any case or matter pending before it. I repeat it. Article 142 of Indian Constitution authorizes the Supreme Court to enforce decree or order that it considers necessary for doing complete justice in any case or matter pending before it. So, if Supreme Court finds that there is a need for something to be done to get complete justice, it can do it. In many cases, the Supreme Court judges have gone to the extent of personally supervising the process of investigation. The proactive stand of the Supreme Court of India has created a desirable impact, but this, even at its best, can only provide a lead. See here we are not talking about the negative, we are talking about the positive aspect. Under Article 142, Supreme Court has all the powers to do whatever it wants to get the complete justice. In many cases, like the judges of Supreme Court, they themselves have supervised the process of investigation. But dear students, most corruption cases, however, have to be brought before the ordinary courts as required under the provisions of the Prevention of Corruption Act. Is it clear? So, Supreme Court is taking some stands. They are very good, but most of the corrupt cases are not brought to Supreme Court. They are brought under the ordinary courts. If the judiciary has to act, has an effective instrument of restraint, the necessary burden has to be borne by the entire judicial system and not merely Supreme Court. So this is a very, very important thing. Under Article 142, Supreme Court is doing a commendable work. But this power is not given to all. This is the power which is enjoyed by the Supreme Court. But most of the corrupt cases are being put under or brought to the ordinary courts. The judiciary is ineffective for the reason that there is official angle for official corruption too. This corruption can be broadly divided into two general categories. One is corruption of scams. As in case of large contracts and big favors at the higher levels of the government, this normally involves politicians directly. It is in respect of the scam that Supreme Court of India has been successful in taking activist stand. So it is not taking reactive stand, it is activist stand. Only in case of big cases. But what about the retail corruption? The other variety is the retail corruption. This is extremely very important, because it is extortionary corruption. This is coercive corruption, which touches the lives of the most of the citizens in the country. Retail corruption is more widespread. Public Affairs Center recent studies provide evidence on the extent of retail corruption in India. According to these studies, every fourth person in Chennai, dear students, every fourth person. According to these studies, every fourth person in Chennai ends up paying a bribe in dealing with the agency such as Urban Development Authority, Electricity Board, Municipality Corporation. While in Bangalore, it is 1/8 persons, and in Pune, 1 in 17 persons. See the fate. 1 in 4 in Chennai means if there are 400 people, means 100 people have given money. See this after a survey, what might be the reality? Every 1 in 4 person in Chennai ends up paying bribe in dealing with agencies for minor things like electricity board, municipal corporation. 1/8 in Bangalore. So this is a very important thing. Please internalize and put these facts. Clearly, retail corruption is widespread and deserves to be addressed with the same degree of seriousness as scams, if not more, because it touches the lives of citizens in many extraordinary ways. Right? Please concentrate here. 4 conditions to act as an effective instrument. What are the conditions under which judiciary can act as effective instrument? Very important. One is when the judiciary is independent. Second, when judicial enforcement is there. Free access to judiciary. Judicial effectiveness. See, these are the 4 things which decide whether judiciary is effective or not. In India, we have all the 3. The 4th one is lacking. Judiciary in India. Here, the 3, judicial independence, enforcement, and free access to judiciary, all are there. The 4th one, judicial effectiveness, is missing. Judiciary in India is independent. There is judicial enforcement. The judiciary in India is capable of enforcing its decisions. There is access to judiciary, but there is no organizational efficiency in the judiciary in disposing of the cases without long delays. Very important. This sum of the everything with respect to judiciary. This is very important from the general point of view also. Social control. Social control is how society control, how people control. Let us understand first how society control people first. Next, think about how people can control corruption. Every society exerts control. Social control is more in traditional societies, in simple societies, less in urban society. We are talking about social control on the people. Why you won't be willing to marry a person outside your religion, outside your caste? Social control. Why you won't be intimate to all the persons whom you come across, even though you have opportunity? Social control. Your biological instincts are suppressed. Why? Social control. society has that power. But when it comes to society controlling corruption, it has failed. Dear students, let me sum up the whole topic of social control here. Here, the crux is, if a democracy has to be vibrant, social control is very, very important. Civil society must be very, very strong. If the civil society is not strong, democracy cannot be vibrant. If people who are the kings, if they are not asking if there is anything wrong, definitely they will go and do the way they want. Dear students, as of my knowledge, according to my knowledge, most of you are aware of the areas where corruption is happening. Why are you not opposing them? Is there anyone who doesn't know where the corruption is happening? There are some departments like revenue, police, where corruption is institutionalized. It's an open secret. Then why are you not forcing that? Very important here. Social control is very, very important. If social control is not there, if there is no vibrant civil society, democracy cannot work. Here we'll study under 3 headings: need of strong and vigilant civil society in India, and citizens' voices. Under this, second HRC has dealt with things. A strong and vibrant civil society can be a check on corruption and form the basis of countervailing the action. A strong and vigilant civil society can check corruption and also act as an opposing force for corruption. Corrupt states aboard and anti-corrupt bodies, watchdog organizations, which eventually end up concealing and protecting corruption instead of punishing it, because no one outside the state structure is in a position to demand accountability if the results are unsatisfied. See, there are many chief ministers who went to jail and who came. Are you aware that why did these people went to jail only for 1 or 2 months? See, if a chain snatcher, if a pickpocketer, or if they has done any other crime, will be sent to jail for years. Here, these people have looted crores of money. They go to jail, some more they stay some time and they come back. Have you ever questioned that? Because nobody outside the state structure is in a position to demand accountability. Even the most comprehensive set of formal democratic institutions may not be in a position to produce the needed accountability in the absence of a strong and vigilant civil society to energize them. Right? So, if there is no civil society, strong civil society, nothing can happen. Why is it happening? Think it over. Why are you not opposing? Leave the others. Why are you not opposing in the first instance? You know where the corruption are happening. If this is the case, definitely they will do the same thing. Have you seen any individual who is taking bribe low? Almost no. Because among your relative, among your friends, you know many who will be taking money. Civil society in India, according to second ARC, Civil society in India is having hangover of old attitudes of inhibitions. So old attitudes and inhibitions continue to persist. This has been in two ways. Number one, civil society in India is not too keen to look into the actual processes of the state. Second, there is a shared belief and inheritance from the past, once again, that it is perfectly all right for those occupying public service, public officers to use the state, its structure, resources in a manner they choose. That is in furtherance of their private interest. When we were ruled by British, we were having certain attitudes. We are having certain ideas as to how the civil servant will be there. We still are in the same one. We are having the same attitudes itself. We are not bothered about what is the state doing. Say, for example, small example to you. Think that the budget of your state, maybe AP, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Delhi, think that it is 100 rupees. Is there anyone who is aware that in this 100 rupees, how much money is being spent on education, how much on police, how much on other things? You are very much part of civil service. How many of you are aware at the center budget was being passed? How much amount is going for defense, for education, how much amount? What is going inside the state? You are not aware and you are not bothered. This is a very, very sad state of affairs. Can anyone say what is the total amount of budget of your state and also India? I don't want exact figures. General. You are not aware. Why? See, if this is the state of your, think about the ordinary people. Next, civil society in India does not share common vision and values. A very, very important thing, very important defect. The main dimension, of course, is that civil society in India does not share a common vision or values so far as corruption is concerned. As far as corruption is concerned, they don't have common vision and values. Some say that corruption is okay. If you are criticizing one CM who has already been to jail, will say all will be doing the same. There is no consensus, common vision, common values with respect to corruption. There is no common vision and values with respect to corruption. It has not developed a strong, legitimate norms about what is right and what is wrong. And as a result, it is not in a position to promulgate codes of good practice. As we discussed earlier, what law we have is just a manifestation of what society wants. What society wants, according to society, what is good? It is the same thing which is been in law. Since we are not having common vision and values with respect to corruption, it is very, very difficult to come up with the legitimate norms about what is right and wrong with respect to good code of conduct. Since there is no widely shared popular conception of right and wrong, which can be used as a benchmark to judge the behavior of civil servants, there has been no judgment at all. A very, very powerful line. See, here, who is correct, who is bad, who is right? There is no common benchmark. Because of that, it has led to a situation where there is no judgment at all. Since there is no widely shared popular conception of right and wrong, which can be used as a benchmark to judge the behavior of civil servants, there has been no judgment at all. Why there is no judgment? on the civil servants' behavior? Because there is no consensus as to what is right and what is wrong. This perhaps explains the fact that although quite a few groups are working in the area of civil liberties and human rights, there are not many groups working in the area of fighting corruption. If there is anyone fighting, very few. In Karnataka, there is one RTI activist, Hiremat. I have not heard any others who are fighting against corruption. You are all aware of corruption. Every street, every village is having one association or other association to fight about corruption, fight about casteism, fight about their needs. Why there is no organization to fight about corruption when you all are aware that there is corruption? Because there is no consensus as to what is corruption, who is good, who is not good. H.D. Shourie of Common Cause had put up a brave but solitary fight, mainly through the courts against corruption. The only other group, Samuel Powell's Public Affairs Center in Bangalore, is better known abroad than in India. See, these are the few cases where they are fighting against corruption. Yes. And Samuel Powell's Public Affairs Center in Bangalore. So please note this example, very, very important. We need to have many like this. Why we have only few? Because we lack common vision and value with respect to what corruption is. Information about government is a precondition for any meaningful anti-corruption effort by civil society. In India, a citizen was entitled to have access to government information only if he could satisfy the authorities that his life is affected by such information. So information is very, very important. But in India, one of the lacunae with respect to providing information is if it is affecting him, if it satisfies the authorities that this affects his life, then only they are getting information. This is one of the greatest debacle. And as we have discussed with respect to Official Secret Act. Official Secret Act was a government smoke screen to deny the members of the public access to government information. The bottom line is that knowledge is power. Therefore, Official Secret Act is a handy weapon in the hands of civil servants to hold on to as much as it flows to their chest as possible. It has the blessing of the ruling politicians who, in any case, would sincerely wish to account for their dubious decision. Secondly, HRC has recommended that Official Secret Act 1923 should be repealed. Under Section 5, under the disguise, under a broad content of national security, almost all the information has been turned into secrecy. Official Secret Act is one of the hindrance. Next, with respect to Right to Information Act, which has been recently been enacted, is a path-breaking legislation which signs the march of darkness of secrecy to the dawn of the transparency. The Right to Information Act will be a powerful means for fighting corruption. It will increase the flow of official information to the members of the public and in that sense, supplement the process of effectively overcoming the government process by the civil society. See, previously, they used to give information only if it is affecting the life of that person. Now it is not the case. You have the right to ask any information. Knowledge is power, and this knowledge about the working of government is given by Right to Information Act. Right. Next is citizens' voice. Social disapproval when citizens voice their concerns about corruption, how it is working. We'll look into these things. Social disapproval is a very, very important one and very powerful in Japan. Citizens, very important thing which you have to understand with respect to Japan is nearly half of the prime ministers are retired civil servants. Retired civil servants. See here in Japan, we have a peculiar kind of system where, say for example, there are 100 members. Definitely all the 100 members in a group cannot be promoted. In that, think that some 50 will be promoted. Then 50 others are left over. Those people who don't get promoted, they resign from civil service. And as I told you, nearly 50% of the prime ministers in Japan are the retired civil servants. And they start their next career, that is politics. Citizens' voice can be used to expose, denounce, and retain corruption behavior. In Japan, for example, social disapproval has been the principal means of regulating the behavior of the civil servants. Social disapproval in Japan is expressed in several ways. One is social shaming of civil servants of questionable integrity. The other is political embarrassment, and as the Japanese civil servants admit, political embarrassment can be a very effective form of expressing the social disapproval of the official conduct. When there is a pressure from the society, when there is pressure from the civil society, then it becomes very, very difficult for the civil servant to involve in corruption. In Japan, if someone is found guilty, civil servant is found guilty of corruption, there will be social shaming, especially throughout the internet, throughout the social medias. And because of this, though they have a lot of discretion in Japan, they won't be involving in corrupt practices. Let me explain this further. Social disapproval can be effective only in those countries in which tradition has placed a high premium on civil servants, and the civil servants on their part value the opinion of society. Social disapproval will be effective only when civil servants obey the opinion of the society. If they don't value the opinion of the society, who cares? See, I don't care if society says that I am a thief. Okay? Because it is not the executive, legislature, or judiciary to punish you, to make law, to execute the things. It is only a form of social control. Say, for example, you are in a village. Somehow, in village, it is often said that like there won't be much intimacy between boys and girls. If some boy is speaking to some girl, it will be seen with suspicion. They feel something fishy going on. So somehow they avoid the things. Why? Because they value the opinion of the society, opinion of the villagers. If there is one person, like in Kannada, there is a proverb, Muru bittoru urge doddoru. If this person thinks that I don't care for society, then civil society pressure won't be effective. It will be effective only when their opinion is valued by the civil servant. It is necessary, though, therefore, that the civil society should come forward to denounce corruption and express its disapproval. Civil society disapproval is ineffective. Societal acceptance is essentially an expression of social capitalization. Societal acceptance is essentially an expression of social capitalization, and it is determinantal to the detection and punishment of the corruption, because citizens do not come forward to cooperate with the government in reporting corruption. When society is accepting corruption, society is accepting corruption, when society is surrendering or yielding or submitting to this, detection and punishment of corruption becomes very, very difficult. Only when society is not accepting these things, we can control corruption by social disapproval. In fact, social capitalization or social capitulation or social acceptance is a familiar sight in most of the countries. In most of the countries, people accept corruption. There is a societal acceptance of corruption. In these countries, economic development is low, negative, or uneven. There are institutional monopolies and a lack of economic or political alternative. People see corruption as inevitable and efforts to fight it as futile, as in ours. In such a setting, there are few alternatives to dealing with corrupt civil servant except on their terms, and it is in the interest of corrupt civil servants to preserve the captive situation for as long as they can. When society is accepting corruption, how can we fight corruption? If there is one or two who want to fight, it will be a futile exercise. When everybody is accepting this fact, okay, these are some of the things about corruption. My dear students, this was the exclusive thing with respect to corruption. Almost like most of the questions which have been asked in civil service examination ethics paper can be answered with the things which I have provided to you. It's very, very important that you go through these things. Let us take up another important topic, strengthening of ethical and moral values in governance. Please think it over. Strengthening of ethical and moral values in governance. What do you understand by this? So this is in your 6th chapter, strengthening of ethical moral values in governance. What do you understand by strengthening of ethical moral values in governance? Can you please apply your thought for this? Ethical and moral values in governance. First of all, please break down the things given. As I've already given you an example, special economic zones. This was the essay which I wrote. In special economic zones are boon or bane? That was the question in essay. When we were writing, it was for 200 marks. I got 130 out of 200. What did I write? I just wrote, why are they called special? Why are they called economic? Why are they called zones? Afterwards, I just took up positive and negative aspects. Afterwards, I concluded that in the era of LPG, we have to take SEZ for our advantage. If we don't take SEZs for our advantage, we will be left behind in the era of globalization. LPG is inevitable, globalization is inevitable. So this was the thing. So any question, first break that, strengthening the ethical and moral values in governance. So ethics means set of standards. How do you strengthen this standard? Ethical standards are there. How do you make them strong? As you are aware, governance is all encompassing one. Can anyone explain what is governance? A very, very important aspect. What is governance? I think I have told more than 20 times. What is governance? What are the different ways in which we have defined governance? Number one, maximizing the citizens' welfare. Anything which is leading to increasing the welfare of the people. What are the other ways we have defined? Please remember, try to remember, recall.
Following the system of processes and procedures.
Okay, like tried. I won't say well tried. Tried. Okay. Following the system procedures. Okay. Then anyone?
Corporations.
Please come again, Gagan.
So corporation, like corporate.
Corporation. Okay. Any other thing?
Basically, it's all form of serving people, like meeting their needs or rendering them services.
Okay, good enough. I'll explain this. Please concentrate. See, as I told you, one of the most authentic, one of the most powerful classes for ethics, like you are hearing. You just go and watch, listen, anything. Like it may not be true when you see a small video which will be done for just few minutes. When you take the whole class, like I won't be feeling shy to say that indisputably my class is the best, because I have put that effort and I have taken pain to search all the important things, authentic things. If you would have followed everything what I have told in the class, referred to the things, at least in the beginning itself I have told, what I need is just half an hour revision after my class. Already like 250 marks in ethics paper is yours. No need of preparation, any other thing. Once again, I reiterate, dear students, first, please do read what I have given. Please follow my class. Afterwards, you can add upon. You can be better than me. The only reason I say that I have got little more is I have put more effort. That is the only thing. So don't read any other thing, any other material before completing what I have taught. Because I'm pretty confident that what I have given is very important, very crisp, very accurate. Afterwards, you can add upon the things. Okay, please concentrate here. Once again, you won't get this clarity again with respect to governance. First, according to second ARC, anything which is maximizing the welfare of the people. I have given, I will just be telling you 3 important words. So here, madam said that following mechanisms, rules, yes. That is there. It's in the other way. Governance includes all the mechanisms, processes, procedures, everything which are required for the welfare of the people, maximizing the welfare of the people. Governance includes values, mechanisms, procedures, like whatever you want, you can write. So here 2 things. in governance, you can write anything like mechanisms, procedures, processes. Afterwards, values, ethics, norms, all this thing. This is one. So governance cannot be easily seen. Is it clear? Governance includes everything to maximize the welfare of the people. That is one aspect. So now forget these things. Most accepted worldwide concept about governance is collective decision making. Please understand this. Please internalize this. Collective decision making and implementation. Collective problem solving and its implementation. Collective law making and its implementation. They all mean the same. So I reiterate, what is governance? Governance is the act of collective decision making and implementation. Collective problem solving and its implementation. Collective law making and implementation. Dear students, any one of this is more than sufficient and all they mean the same. Governance is collective decision making and its implementation. So how you strengthen the ethical standards in the governance? According to second ARC, governance is primarily a series of service operations with the ultimate objective of maximizing citizens' welfare. Just underline, just things maximizing citizen welfare and second ARC. Because there are many people who don't know this. So we have to mention second ARC. But this is the most authenticated definition. It is very much contextual to India. Strengthening the ethical and moral values in governance. First of all, according to second ARC, ethical standards do not by themselves ensure ethical behavior. Ethical standards do not by themselves ensure ethical behavior. Means you have got set of standards. These standards themselves won't lead to ethical behavior. By just having these standards, we are not assured that this will be followed. Ethical behavior requires a robust culture of integrity. Very, very powerful line. This you have to use more often. Can anyone explain this line? If you can explain this line, almost like ethics is in your hand. Ethical.
It needs
Please go ahead.
It needs to be inculcated to us from our childhood. That is when we start following it on a regular basis, consistently.
Good, but you are not hitting the bullseye. Generally, you are explaining the same thing which is there. But good, well tried. I have already explained this one. Yes, well tried. Ethical behavior requires a robust culture of integrity. Okay. This see, having standards is not enough. Just by having ethical standards, it won't assure ethical behavior. They have asked a question also, what do you understand by ethical behavior? What is culture? Culture means that which is passed on from one generation to another. Culture is that which is learned. Culture is that which is accepted by most members of the society. What is integrity? Integrity is ethics in action, following ethical standards. Ethical behavior requires robust culture of integrity. Just simple word means integrity should be cultural. Integrity అనేది మన సంస్కృతిలో రావాలి. following the ethical standards should be present in our culture. Following ethical standards, integrity. What is integrity? Following ethical standards. That should become cultural. Are we having the culture of integrity? No. We are learning how to be corrupt from one generation to another. Most member of the society accept that it's okay to be corrupt. Very important. So integrity should be cultural. What is integrity? Following ethical standards, ethics in action. So when it is cultural, what does it means? Means following ethical standards has been passed on from one generation to another. Following ethical standard is learned. Most member of the society feel that following ethical standard is correct. Very important to strengthen the ethical and moral values in government, we should have culture of integrity. So is the concept of culture of integrity clear to you? You can write in your own words also. Integrity means following the ethical standards. So following the ethical standard should be cultural. If it becomes cultural, then there will be ethical behavior. See, following ethical standards, if it is cultural, definitely ethical behavior will be there. First and foremost, the crux of this topic, having the culture of integrity is the one. Okay, can anyone explain me this? Corruption is an important manifestation of failure of ethics. Okay, let me explain this. Think that ethics has failed. Think that ethics has failed means it has led, there is a situation of unethicalness. Unethical. This unethical thing manifests into different forms. An important form is corruption. There cannot be ethics and corruption together. Corruption is an important manifestation of the failure of ethics. Ethics has failed. This failed state has given rise to many important manifestations. In that, corruption is one of the most important thing. So this also we have discussed. Framework for ethical behavior. This is especially with respect to public life. So any framework of ethical behavior must include the following. If you want to have, see how to strengthen the ethical standards. In this, we are talking about a framework for ethical behavior. Any framework of ethical behavior must include the following: codification of the ethical norms and practices. See, if you are not codifying the ethical standards, there won't be any standard to refer to. Disclosing the personal interest to avoid conflict between the public interest and personal interest. Creating a mechanism for enforcing the relevant codes. See here, you have codified them. Next, you are coming up with a mechanism to enforce these codes, providing norms for qualifying and disqualifying the public functionary from the office. This we have already discussed. This is a very, very important framework, especially with regard to the public life. You can go take for civil servant, you can take for public servant. How to promote ethical behavior? This also we have discussed. How to promote the ethical behavior? The crux of the ethical behavior does not lie in bold words, does not lie in the ethical standards. But where does it lie? It lies in the adoption of ethical standards into action. Adoption of ethical standards into action. What is it called? This is called integrity. In sanction against the violation of ethical standards, we can have ethical behavior. For that, we should have ethical standards. But these ethical standards are not enough. Along with that, these ethical standards have to be put in action. Means there should be integrity. If there is violation, there has to be punishment. And putting in place competent disciplinary bodies to investigate allegations of ethical standards violations and impose sanctions quickly, and in promoting the culture of integrity. We have to promote the culture of integrity. Promoting the culture of integrity means a culture where people accept that they have to follow ethical standards. It is generally shared by the common all the people. So very, very important. See, don't mug up these things. You have to internalize this thing. How to promote ethical behavior? One, the crux of ethical behavior does not lie in bold words and expression installed as ethical standards. Along with that, you should have to put this into action. If there is any violation, you have to punish them. And if whenever there is ambiguity, there should be investigation into the allegation of violations. And if you are found guilty, you have to be punished. And you have to promote a culture where you are following the ethical standards. This clear idea of strengthening the ethical standards, you won't get anywhere. So this also we have discussed. An across the board effort is needed to fight deviant behaviors. In this, one of the most important thing they are asking about governance. Governance, as I told you, it includes everything: government, corporation, civil society, your private sector, your non-governmental organization, international organization, multinational organization, everything comes in governance. Governance is all encompassing. Governance is a process. So an across the board effort needs to include corporate ethics and ethics in business also. So to bring about strengthening the ethical standards in governance, you should add the corporate ethics. The private organization also should be added. In fact, there should be a paradigm shift from the prejudictive, derogatory business ethics. Means ethics for business, not that. Ethics in business should be the one. Whatever you do, there should be ethics in business, not business ethics. Ethics means set of standards for the business. No. Set of standards for that business is not the correct one. It is a very derogatory one. There is a need for ethics for every professional, voluntary organization, civil society structures. Further, there should be ethics in citizens' behavior because such behavior impinges directly on the ethics in government and administration. Next, very important, Yata Raja Tata Praja. Yata Raja Tata Praja. This is true. So, has the king, so the citizens. Ramayana, in Ramayana, Maharishi Valmiki has underscored a very basic principle of governance in simple words. Yata Raja Tata Praja. The message is loud and clear. General erosion in values, ethics, morality, or integrity that is seen in a society only mirrors the character of those who run the affairs of the society. Don't you agree? So it is all just mirroring what is there at the top. Your politicians, your administrators, if all of them corrupt, it shows that how it is affecting you also. Yata Raja, Tata Praja, the word is self-explanatory. It is given in Ramayana. If you say that, that is enough. Furthermore, you can add upon to this one, polar star. It is often said as Dhruva Nakshatra. It's in north. He who administers government by means of his virtues may be compared to pole star, which keeps its place and all other stars turn towards it. When the ruler is himself right, the people naturally follow him in his right course. If the government is by men who are derelict, the government will suffer. So here, Yata Raja Tata Praja. If those who are in power, if they are corrupt, the same will be permitted, same will permit to the citizens also. These all the things, as I told you, given in second ARC. For a paradigm change, it has to come from the top, the leader. If there is any change you want to bring up, then it has to come from the leader. See, in a big society, how it will be impacting if the leader is correct, if the leader is ethical, and how it will affect only when only one individual at the bottom rung is ethical. True, definitely it will have major impact. It doesn't mean that people can do whatever they want. Say, for example, dear students, our society, take example, like our society, he is like a palav, a puliora, or a biryani. We are all constituents. For the biryani or the palav to be good, the rice should be very, very good. You cannot have, like, if we are using basmati rice and things like that, definitely it will be one of the important things. The curry leaves which you are using should be fresh. The oil which you are using should be very fresh. How you are boiling on a very slow, like on slow and steady, it is important. So when all these ingredients are good, then only society can become good. So don't get confused. This is not with Yata Raja Tata Praja. It is opposite of that I am saying. So both this should be there. Only when the ingredients are correct, then only you will get a good biryani. If the individual thinks that what is there, if I just say, if I am corrupt, it won't make any sense. No. Society is a group of people. It's all depend upon the ingredients. If you are using some spoiled oil, if you are not using the correct rice, if you are not boiling properly, if you are not using correct curry leaves, correct spices, how can you expect the biryani to be good? So To strengthen the ethical behavior, as we have studied earlier, individual behavior, individual things are also very, very important. At the same time, the people who are there in the top also should be ethical. If any paradigm change has to come in the matter of ethics in governance, it has to come from the top in every section of the society. Like charity, maybe more than maybe more than that. Sense of morality also might begin from the door of the leader who practices that. Can a beggar go for charity? No. It is the people who are having money. Similarly, and even more than that, it is the people who are in power, who are the leaders, who should be the guiding stars. When those wielding power in the governments, whichever wing of the state they may belong, set about standardizing norms of conduct, they must first do so for themselves. Whichever may be the branch of governance, those who are setting the standards, those who are forming the rules, those who are implementing the rules, first of all, they have to be the people who are following them. There has to be integrity, walk the talk, need of attitudinal reforms in our private life. Until and unless there is no attitudinal reforms, attitudinal change, nothing can be done. Any machinery is as good as man working it. The widespread corruption that we notice all around only mirrors the general erosion of morality and ethics in our society. Dear students, corruption is institutionalized. What does this indicate? It indicates that the people of that area are corrupt. It is just the indication of the thing. Going back to our example, when the palav is not good, what does this mean? It means you are not used the proper rice, you are not cooked properly, you are not used fresh curry leaves, spices. It just indicates the indicators, constituents. The ultimate guarantee against abuse of power, legislature, judiciary, executive, lies in the political and legal safeguards against such abuse. A vigilant public opinion and in a sense of justice in the people generally. I read it again. The ultimate guarantee against abuse of power, legislature, judiciary, and executive, lies in the political and legal safeguards against such abuses. So it all depends upon how you are punishing them. In the vigilant public opinion, how the society acting on that, and in the sense of justice in people general. These are some of the things which are present in second year series. So I am quoting because this may be directly picked in your examination. If you want to reform, attitudinal reforms will have to be first brought about even in our private lives. So as we have discussed, private lives have implication on public life and public have on private life. According to Andrew Bentley, a constitution may indicate the direction in which we are to move, but social structure will decide how far we are able to move and at what pace. Our constitution is very good. It indicates the direction in which we have to go. But what is the nature of the society we are having? Is the society made up of people who are not having ethical standards, who are not the people of integrity? That decides the time to move. How far we'll move and at what pace is decided by the society. A very famous Mahatma Gandhi quote. So once again, my dear students, Mahatma Gandhi is one of the most important person. The most important. See, general studies, one, it has got history, geography, it has got society, here culture again. Now it is being separated, like almost though it is part. Culture, history, geography, society. Once again here, if you go to history, Indian history and world history. Once again, Indian history, ancient, medieval, and modern. So all these things, one part in history is this much. Say, if you go take geography once again, India and world, physical, social, economic, geography. So how much marks you will be getting? Hardly you will be getting 60 to 70 marks from history, geography, all this individual. I think topper got 104 or 8, so 108 in GS1. So how much marks you would have got in history, geography? Not more than 30 or 40, because there is also societal part. So why I gave this analogy is, in many cases, just by knowing about Gandhiji, you will get more than 60-70 marks. As I said, Mahatma Gandhi, one of the most favorite for all examiners, because he is the father of nation, right? So it is our fundamental duty to know about Gandhiji. Dear students, whatever Gandhiji has said, please internalize. In many cases, if you get in essay or anywhere, Gandhiji will be more worth, more valuable to you in getting the service than you read the entire history or geography. Very, very important. Read everything about Gandhi, but don't read haphazardly as and when you need some studies. Go in a systematic way. As human beings, our greatness lies not so much in being able to remake the world, that is a myth of atomic age, as in being able to remake ourselves. So all these are explaining the need of ethics in private lives. So there is another important area mentioned. Mahatma Gandhi once again, be the change you wish to see in the world. You want to have a society where there is no corruption. First, you don't be involved in corruption. The same is said by Confucius, who emphasizes the rightness of life and character building. This is in conformity with Dharma or righteousness as thought by all religions in the world, preached by Buddha very predominantly in the fourth noble truth. So, if you are reading history, Buddhism and Jainism are the two important aspects. Especially if you are studying in ancient history, Buddhism, Jainism, Vedic culture, along with Indus Valley civilization. If you concentrate these four things, these are the like core areas. Instead of you going through the entire history, ancient history especially, Buddhism, Jainism, Vedas, and Indus Valley civilization, chances of you getting more marks are there. Because you can answer anything if you master these areas. So you should be the change you wish to see. And the Confucius emphasizing on righteousness, they all mean the same. Buddha's things very, very important in this direction. Dear student, the fourth one, Buddha says a very, very important thing. Contact is the cause for misery. It may be for anything. Say, for example, a fakir, a Baba, or anyone. For them, nothing to lose. They don't have anything to lose. for a real saint, real fakir, or any individual. Say, for example, your church father, your mullah of a masjid, Hazrat, they don't have anything to lose. Contact is a cause for misery. If you are thinking of getting anything, it may be love, it may be job. Why you are listening to this class? Because you have something, you have got one, you are attached to something. Until and unless you attach to something, suffering is always there. So according to the four noble truths you have to learn, and the fourth one speaks about the method we must follow to stop pain and misery. And the eightfold paths. These are very, very important. You have to internalize. UPSC is often asking questions in this area. A very important one, which is given in the second ARC, how in Hong Kong, the things turned. Hong Kong was not that corruption free as you know today. How Hong Kong has corruption in the example, beautiful example has given. Hong Kong has reduced corruption in its government and more importantly has broken the mindset of the people about the inevitability of corruption. See here. If it was possible to break the attitude, the mindset of the people that corruption is inevitable in Hong Kong, it is also possible in India. See, if they have mentioned in second essay, how important is this? Hong Kong ICAC. Hong Kong was able to reduce corruption in its government because of this agency. So this agency was very, very independent. This agency was accountable only to the top government leadership with its own officials, forbidden to work in other public agencies for years after leaving. ICAC has free from networks of corruption as its architects could make it. Its powers are remarkable too. Businesses as well, official corruption falls within its mandate. It can seize personal and business records with ease and can it can place the burden of proving innocence on the suspect. Very, very important. So what is this? Burden of proving innocence on the suspect means this agency can go and they can just say that you are corrupt. They can just say that you are corrupt and they can prosecute you. No, I am not corrupt. It falls on this individual to prove. But in normal process, in normal prosecution, the other way around, we have to prove that an individual is corrupt with evidences, all these things. So what happens? We won't be having the necessary evidences. So he will be scot-free then. So this burden of proving innocent, this concept we have to take. Right? What democracies can learn from ICAC's focus on civil society? A very, very important one. I just read these things. Many democracies would not confirm such powers, but they can learn from this institutions on civil society. Its massive, well-produced public relation campaigns have broken the belief that corruption is inevitable. People, they started feeling, they changed their attitude. Previously, people thought that corruption is inevitable. How could they do? Television advertisements publish a phone number for complaints and promise protection. So if there is any phone number, and if they say that your privacy will be protected, and it will be seen that nothing will be harmed, won't you call these people and say that these are the areas where corruption is happening? Corruption is portrayed in such campaigns and in material distributed to the schools as harmful to families, to the economy, and to the traditional values, Chinese values. See how they are acting on the civil society, how they are trying to change. Many people in Hong Kong now report abuse to ACIC, and Watch has wrongdoers publicly disgraced. By 1980s, young people in Hong Kong took a stricter view on corruption than did their elders once in these societies. This was able to change the attitude of the people, has changed the social environment that tolerated corruption and helped to sustain it. The attitude of people can be changed. So how to change the attitude? A very, very important thing, because your syllabus is concentrating on attitude. We have learned a lot about attitude. The clearest lesson that Hong Kong's experience has to offer is that attitudes of the people can be changed through focused effort. Well, on the whole, people need to be exposed to the information about incentives to have a corruption-free government. See, now why we are tolerating this? We are not aware that if the society is corruption-free, we'll be very happy. We are talking like things, it's okay. IAS officer is corrupt, it's okay. Our MLA, MP is corrupt, it's okay. No. You are not aware how it is hurting you. Change will come when the incentives to throw out the corrupt system becomes stronger than the incentive to retain such system. So when you will understand the benefits of throwing corruption, your attitude will change. So this is a important example given. So please do take the things, especially the things which I provide in